Welcome to a vital conversation today, inspired by an article from My Adrenal Life, titled, Why Comparison is Dangerous in Adrenal Insufficiency Communities. It tackles a really common yet often unaddressed struggle many patients face when managing a complex chronic condition.
That's right, Chloe. The article really zeroes in on that unsettling experience. Someone in an online community shares what worked for them, another person tries it, and then they're left quietly wondering why it didn't work the same way, or perhaps even worse, why they feel even more unwell.
And that feeling of, why is this easier for them than it is for me, must be incredibly confusing, frustrating, and ultimately quite isolating when you're already doing everything you can to manage something as complex as adrenal insufficiency.
It certainly can be, but the article emphasizes there's a profound reason for this disconnect, and it's rooted in both the biological realities of adrenal insufficiency and the inherent psychology of human comparison. The article specifically covers people living with primary adrenal insufficiency, secondary AI, tertiary AI, and even iatrogenic AI.
Let's unpack that. The first major point the article makes is that not all adrenal insufficiency is the same. It categorizes it quite clearly.
Exactly. The article explains how adrenal insufficiency reflects a disruption along the HPA axis, but where that disruption occurs makes a huge difference. For example, primary adrenal insufficiency, or Addison's disease, means the adrenal glands themselves can't produce cortisol or aldosterone. But in secondary or tertiary AI, the problem is higher up in the pituitary or hypothalamus, respectively, and typically only cortisol is affected, not aldosterone.
So someone with Addison's will have a fundamentally different physiological need compared to someone with secondary AI, even though both are dealing with a cortisol deficiency. The NIDDK and the Endocrine Society, as cited in the article, clearly distinguish these forms.
That's a crucial distinction. Losing aldosterone, which happens in primary AI, profoundly impacts electrolyte balance and blood pressure, making management inherently different. You can't compare those two experiences directly.
But the article goes even further, stating that even within the same diagnosis, biology still varies significantly. This seems like it adds another layer of complexity to the comparison problem.
It absolutely does. Even if two people have, say, secondary adrenal insufficiency, their individual bodies will still respond uniquely. Factors like how well they absorb cortisol medication, their metabolism of that medication, any co-occurring health conditions, and even their daily stress load, which directly influences cortisol demand, all play a part. Clinical overviews, including one in JAMA mentioned in the article, consistently highlight this wide variability in symptoms and severity among individuals.
So it's never just the diagnosis, it's the entire unique physiological landscape of the individual. And this highly individualized nature sets the stage for the psychological aspect of comparison.
Precisely. The American Psychological Association defines social comparison as evaluating oneself by comparing to others, especially when clear standards aren't available. Adrenal insufficiency creates exactly that kind of uncertainty.
Because symptoms fluctuate, energy is unpredictable, and there isn't a universal baseline or a straightforward cure to measure against.
Exactly. When people make comparisons without this critical context, it often leads to self-doubt, misinterpretation of their own progress, and increased stress. And as the NIMH points out, stress itself can significantly impact how the body responds and functions.
So when someone sees another patient online who seems to be thriving on a certain protocol or says, "This fixed me," it can unintentionally cause real harm, even if the intention is genuinely to help.
That's the hidden risk of "it worked for me," the article highlights. Well-meaning statements like, "I stopped doing that," or "you probably don't need that," can unintentionally create confusion, undermine a patient's confidence in their own tailored treatment plan, and even introduce serious risks if someone tries to blindly imitate another's approach. The article also noted common comparison thoughts like, "They can do more than I can," or "I must be doing something wrong," which are inaccurate conclusions based on missing context.
It really underscores that adrenal insufficiency demands individualized context, not replication of someone else's experience.
That's the core message. The evidence from the NIDDK to the Endocrine Society and clinical literature consistently shows significant variability in AI. Different forms involve different hormone patterns and risks, and individual outcomes are never uniform. This complexity needs to be acknowledged.
So, given all this variability and the psychological traps of comparison, how can individuals navigate adrenal insufficiency communities in a way that feels safer and more supportive?
The article suggests some gentle, real-life ideas. It's about consciously noticing which conversations increase your stress or self-doubt, and conversely paying attention to what genuinely feels supportive. It encourages shifting your focus toward your own personal patterns and progress rather than fixating on others' outcomes. It also advises approaching shared experiences as insight, not instruction, as perspective, not comparison, and as support, not a standard to measure yourself against.
Essentially, understanding that others' experiences reflect their unique biology, and that any post is just a snapshot, not a full reality.
Precisely, and recognizing that different outcomes are not just normal but expected. The article offers powerful reassurance. Your experience doesn't need to match anyone else's. Your body isn't wrong for being different, and your path is valid without needing comparison to confirm it. It also touches on the emotional layers comparison connects to, like grief, fear, and pressure.
That's a profoundly important message, especially dealing with a condition as complex and often invisible as adrenal insufficiency. The article truly concludes that if your experience looks different from someone else's, it's not a failure. It's simply biology. And you're navigating it the best way you can, and you're not alone in that. If you found this conversation insightful, share this episode with a friend or colleague.